Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishna Nazir, Perek Beis, Chapter 2, Mishnah Vav, Mishnah 6. Okay, so we were introduced yesterday into this case where a person takes upon himself to supply another Nazir with, meaning not himself, someone else who's a Nazir, with the animals that he needs for his sacrifices when he completes his term of being a Nazir. Now, in this case, the person declared the following: Harei alai legaleach chatzi nazir. Now, again, we have to translate the words first, literally. I take it upon myself to shave half a nazir. Now, we know before that the wording that's used when he wants to take upon himself to supply the animals for another person's sacrifices for when he completes his Naziris is legaleach. He says, it's upon me. We had before. The person said, olai legaleach nazir. It's upon me to shave a nazir. That's an expression where you say that I am taking upon myself to supply him with the animals. Now, in this case, he said, it is upon me to shave, meaning to bring the karbanis, half a nazir. V'shama chaverei v'amar v'ani. And his friend heard him say this, and he said, and I, meaning I too, alai v'galeach chatzi nazir, it's upon me to shave half a nazir. Now, if I were to ask you, what does it mean, it is upon me to shave half a nazir? What would you think that means? What do you think it means?
Someone else
Pay for the animals.
But he says, what's the chatzi nazir mean?
An animal.
is going to shave him after he finishes his.
But what does it mean, chatzi? What's the half nazir? So now, if a person were to say the following, a person were to say straight out, I take upon myself half the offerings of a nazir. That's what he said. I'm taking upon myself half. That means you don't give him half an animal, you give him half the money, and then he buys. Okay? If a person were to say those words straight out, I take upon myself half the offerings of a Nazir, he would be obligated to do what? Pay half, give half the value to pay for half half of the animals that he needs. In this case, he says, but he doesn't say, in this case, doesn't say the words, I take upon myself half the offerings. He says, I take upon myself half Nazir. Now, it would sound like he means to say the same thing, right? That it means to say, I'm taking upon myself half the cost for the animals for the Nazir. However, the Mishnah is going to bring a machlekes here. And the machlekes is based on the fact that since he did not say straight out half the offerings of a Nazir, there is now a question or now a discussion that he didn't mean that actually. So let's read again. A person says, I hereby take upon myself to shave half a nazir. And his friend says, and I too, the same thing. So, how much does each one have to give towards the sacrifices of the other nazir? Each one has to actually pay the complete amount of what a nazir needs. Even though he said these words, chatzi nazir, divrei Rabbi Meir, these words of Rabbi Meir says, in this case, with this expression, with this wording that he used, actually at the end, he has to pay the entire amount for the nazir's animals. Why is that? So according to Rabbi Meir, the thing is like this. You have to take a look at the whole phrase that he said at the beginning of the Mishnah. Harei alai legaleach chatzi nazir. So Reb Meir says that we actually have to look at the first three words on their own. Harei alai legaleach. It is upon me to shave. Those three words themselves imply what? Imply the entire amount. Harei alai legaleach nazir. If a person were to say, Harei alai legaleach nazir, it's upon me to shave a nazir, he'd have to pay the full amount. So when he said the first three words of Harei alai legaleach, those words really imply the full amount. But then he says, chatzi nazir, half a nazir. That means half the amount. So the first half of his statement implied or meant the full amount. The second part of his statement means half. So it would seem that what this guy was doing was he was changing his mind. When he first said Arele the Galeach, he meant a full amount. But then when he changed over to Chatzi Nazir, then already he was changing his mind and saying, no, I only want to do half. So we have in this one expression, the first half that says the full amount, the second half says half the amount. Which part do we follow? Says Reb Meir, the term that's used is tafa slash and rishon. You work with the first statement and you ignore the second statement. And therefore, Reb Meir said that in this case, both people have to give a full amount. Because this, if they wanted to say for only half the amount, they should have said half the sacrifices. Now that he didn't say that, he said it's upon me to shave half a nazir. Therefore, there we assume what he means, or we assume or we interpret what he means as actually the first half meaning one thing, which is a full amount. The second half is half the amount. And in those situations, when a person basically in one statement says two different things, you follow the first half of the statement. And therefore, he has to go ahead, each one has to pay the full amount. That's Rabbi Meir. The Chachamim say, Ze megalei chatzi nazir, ze megalei chatzi nazir. Nope, each one shaves half a nazir. That means each one pays half the amount. According to the Rabbanan, I don't have to split up the statement, even though it's maybe said in not such a clear way, and it could mean, and maybe you could possibly interpret it like Reb Meir. The Chachamim say no, you don't have to interpret it that way. You take the whole statement together. It's all one big statement. It's not two statements. It's one big statement. I take upon myself to shave half a nazir. That means the same thing as saying half the kabbanis, and therefore each person pays for only half the amount for the animals that a nazir would need at the end of his term. Now, in essence, this whole discussion didn't have to take place with two people. Our Mishnah has the case: one person takes upon himself to take care of the animals for someone else. The other person says, "And I too." You didn't have to. It would seemingly, let's say, one person said, "Harei alei legalei chatzi nazir." Okay, we'd have the same discussion. Are there two statements here? Are there two things in this one statement, or is it one long statement? It would have been the same argument. Why did the Mishnah decide to use a case where someone else basically took upon himself to do the same thing as the first? So they bring down here in the notes an explanation. The Mishnah wishes to teach that according to Reb Meir, even the second person's declaration obligates him to pay for a full set of offerings. We do not say that the second person, thinking that the first person was obligated to pay for only half a set, clearly intended only to complete that set. We might have thought that the second person doesn't understand it as two statements together. He'd understand it as one long statement. Even if the halacha says you should see it as two statements together, meaning two separate things, two statements together, whole and half, the person listening wouldn't necessarily translate it like that. And he would assume he means half. And therefore, when he said, I'm doing like him, he just meant to do a half. And therefore, we would say maybe the second person doesn't have to bring the full amount, only half the amount. And therefore, the Mishnah said that it had a case even where the second person is saying it. The Rebbe would say that he too, his statement should not be understood as one long because that's how he understands the first person statement. But the same thing that we said with the first person statement, which is there were two statements together and we follow the first, the second person is following the same pattern, and therefore at the end of the day he also has to pay the full amount. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. And the bottom line is each